Welcome to the Fundamental Principles in Action. In these short videos, we are exploring some of the practical questions that have come up about applying the fundamental principles in our Red Cross work. The fundamental principles are agreed ethical standards for the principled humanitarian action that I always talk about. And you will have all heard me say that the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement is this very, very unique and dynamic interaction between, on the one hand, principled humanitarian response, and on the other hand, legal frameworks that can protect vulnerable people in humanitarian emergencies. So when we talk about principled humanitarian response, if we want to dig deeper, we come to the fundamental principles, the ethical standards for that principled humanitarian response. There is also a substantial body of international Red Cross and Red Crescent movement policy and practice that guides the interpretation and the application of the fundamental principles. To put ethical standards into practice, firstly, you need to know their relative weights. And the fundamental principles are not equally important, as we know from Jean Pictet's work in the late 70s. Jean Pictet was the author of the fundamental principles that the movement adopted in 1965 in the International Conference. And he writes in 1979 that in terms of the fundamental principles, humanity and impartiality are the most important because they express the purpose of our humanitarian movement, why we exist. Neutrality and independence are, by contrast, the tools that we use to achieve that purpose. And then the others form the kind of base of our humanitarian movement. They are about how we are organized. And so we come to the specific question for this video, which has arisen in several different ways from members and staff as we explore how we engage with the Treaty of Waitangi principles, Tiriti. Some Red Cross supporters have raised this question when they see, for example, te reo in Red Cross communications, or other expressions of Aotearoa, New Zealand as a bicultural country. I would propose that there are different lenses through which to understand obligations to the Treaty of Waitangi. Engagement with the Treaty of Waitangi, I would propose, is the best practice in the ethical standards set out in the fundamental principles. And so proposing different lenses, I have three to share with you. The first lens, through the fundamental principles. Humanity, alleviating human suffering and promoting human dignity. And impartiality, that is, responding to where the need is greatest without discrimination. Those are the reasons we exist. One lens we can look at treaty engagement is through the fundamental principles. Humanity and impartiality are ethical standards that require protection of the life and health of all New Zealanders, with particular attention to where the need is greatest. That would seem to be consistent with the standards and the principles of partnership, participation, and protection that we find in the Treaty of Waitangi. Second lens. Another lens that engaging with the treaty principles would be consistent with, I would propose, is that of international and domestic legal standards of best practice. We are, as Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, an organization and a set of organizations who are powered by our commitments to international and domestic law that can protect vulnerable people. And so it's consistent for us to be leaders following international and domestic best practice ourselves. For example, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So the first lens, fundamental principles. The second lens, domestic and international law, best practice. The third lens, I would argue, that is useful as we consider our engagement with the Treaty of Waitangi is to look at this issue through our claim to be auxiliary to the public authorities in the humanitarian field. Although we are not government, engaging with the treaty principles in good faith, I would propose, can add weight to our claim to be auxiliary to the public authorities in the humanitarian field. And so as Aotearoa New Zealand Red Cross people, I would propose that it is consistent with our fundamental principles to look for ways to reflect diverse Maori and Pakeha perspectives and contributions to all of our humanitarian responses, whether in the community, at the national level, or even sometimes in contributions at the international level. We should look, I would argue, to embrace and include a bicultural approach in our everyday work.